Northamptonshire.
Annabelle Amos at breakfast.
BBC Radio Northampton.
Now, they say an Englishman's home is his castle, don't they? But for millions of people, the castle is something they have little say over. That is because they are leaseholders, meaning they pay a management fee or service charge each month on top of their rent or their mortgage. And those fees are going up fast. The BBC's spoken to leaseholders all over the country whose annual fees have increased by 150% or more. Jenny is one of those. She lives in Bloomsbury House in Guildhall Road in Northampton. And, well, her annual fees have tripled in the 10 years she's lived there.
The annual fees went up from £832 in 13-14 to last year £2,662. Now that includes them doing work on the place. But the management fees have gone up from £108 to £350.
When I arrived, I pressed the intercom, but the door itself, which is the door that, is directly onto Guildhall Road, it doesn't really work.
It doesn't work, and it hasn't worked properly since we moved in.
And she's not the only resident of Bloomsbury House that we've spoken to. Another one described his fees going up in the past 2 years from £1,300 to £3,300. And there are all sorts of issues with homeless people sleeping in the lobby and people coming in to nick the parcels that have been delivered for residents. Max Curtis is from Metropolitan Thames Valley, which is the housing association that manages Bloomsbury House, and who's been speaking to the BBC about the issues raised by Jenny and others.
We are a not-for-profit housing association, and what's really important to us is that the system is fair and residents who are experiencing financial challenge are supported. Any increase in service charge really reflects the real cost of delivering services. The last few years has been a period of really very high inflation, and that has driven increase in costs on all manner of things, from materials to labour. Bloomsbury House itself, part of the site is a Grade 2 listed building. The availability of materials and sometimes cost of materials in order to meet the restrictions on a listed building are greater. There's also, over the last few years, there has been a big increase in building insurance premiums, which is covered by resident service charges and we pay for. And then service charge also pays for utilities, electricity, gas in common areas. I hope that what we can do is provide clarity and simplicity wherever possible, and it sounds like on this in this case that hasn't been our residents' experience, and of course we regret that.
One of the major issues in terms of Bloomsbury House is the security of the building. Quite often the doors are broken, the car park doors are broken, people are getting in. There's reports of drug taking in the building, for example, and even a robbery. Why is it the case that these things seemingly are ongoing issues? They seem to happen an awful lot. Why is it the case that this hasn't been dealt with? There
are issues, as you say, with things like rough sleeping in the building. We're very aware of those issues. It's why one of the things that we put in place is a security patrol, because we were so concerned about the impact on our residents of people getting in. And that was at no cost to residents. That's not part of a service charge. It was the right thing to do.
So that's Max Curtis then from the housing association that manages Bloomsbury House, speaking to Phil Shepka. Yesterday, the government said it would bring forward a load of changes, which it says will give leaseholders better protection from excessive fee increases and unfair practices. It also said it would aim to ban leasehold in new build flats. But does it go far enough for people like Jenny, who we heard from a little earlier on? Let's speak to Harry Scoffin, who is a housing campaigner and the founder of Free Leaseholders, which is a pressure group promoting leasehold reform. Morning, Harry.
Hi there, thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. What made you get involved in this?
Well, my mum's personally impacted. I live at home with her. I'm 29, and basically my whole generation, we're only going to be able to ever afford a flat. But the reality is, unlike Scotland and the rest of the world, when you buy a flat, you don't actually own it, and you're like a glorified renter. But unlike a renter, you can't leave a bad landlord behind, without basically losing your capital. And I think that's the key thing. It's not about individual housing associations. It's not about individual managing agents. This is a systemic injustice on a massive scale.
What happened with your mum then? What kind of fee increase
her
has
service
she
charges
seen?
have just gone, it's gone higher and higher and higher. The freeholder, I won't name him, but is an offshore billionaire. And basically, we're all financial prisoners here. The flats can't be sold. She's got no swimming pool, no gym, no garden. nothing fancy, and she's paying about £40,000 a year in service charges. This has taken over my life for 7 years. I've been fighting all the governments to get the law changed on it. And obviously, yes, the government have come out with a statement yesterday, but I'm going to be quite honest. Leaseholders are sick of all these consultations because it's exhausting. And we're up against a multi-billion-pound lobby who've got the best lawyers to basically write in on these consultations. And people have got lives. And all we want is control of the homes that we paid for.
When you say that she now pays £40,000 a year, what did she pay for when she first moved in then? Give us an idea of how much it's gone up.
Well, it was already high, but it's basically gone up by about, I think, 40-50% now in last 5 years. So the fact is, one beds now can't even be sold at auction. And it's just like the whole idea is that we're literally trapped. And the problem is, unlike some leaseholders, we can't get right to manage or we can't buy a freehold because we happen to be above some commercial premises. So unfortunately, there's a hotel below us. So that's a huge loophole in the law. And that isn't just a London thing, that's across the country. And we're going to leaseholders almost every week, filming them in their homes. And they're all affected by these issues that actually all they want to do is be able to fire the managing agent and be like Lord Sugar on The Apprentice and just say you're fired. And that is the rest of the world. And yet somehow it's so difficult. You know, we get told it's complicated. And yet if they want to, they can ram through a bill on assisted dying, which is so complicated. That wasn't a manifesto commitment. Leasehold was. You know, we've endured 7 years of consultations under the last government. A lot of the work was done by the Law Commission 4 years ago, which in of itself was the product of years of consultation and research. You know, Margaret Thatcher was pushing commonhold to replace leasehold as far back as 1987. You know, as soon as many of our former colonies got rid of the British, they went and abolished leasehold. We can get rid of it, and we will not accept it being abolished just for new flats.
What should replace it?
Well, commonhold. You know, Scotland have a form of it. The rest of the world have a form of it. You know, you speak to anyone that doesn't live in this country. So you buy the flat, you own it on a freehold basis, you own a share in the common parts, and then there's a commonhold association, and that will be made up of your neighbours that you elect. So there'll be a board of directors. They're accountable only to the fellow flat owners. And then you appoint a managing agent. And if you're not happy with the managing agent, at the annual general meeting, it gets replaced. Don't get me wrong, some residents may fall out of each other, but I'd much rather have democracy than living under a sort of authoritarian rule with one freeholder living in a tax haven who is trying to extract as much wealth as they can out of the hapless homeowners. And it's not even about private freeholders. Even housing associations, not talking about the one on the show today, but generally they don't have the same interests as the flat owners because they're not the ones picking up the tab generally. It's the flat owners or the leaseholders who legally actually, believe it or not, are tenants. We don't own a brick. We just own the right to occupy the property for a set period of time. We care about best financial value. We care about getting local contractors. We see cases where people are in the Midlands and they're getting contractors coming in from London, you know, coming up from London. You know, people are paying for that. And yet we've just, you know, it's a form of taxation without representation. You know, we've got the right to vote in this country. And yet we've got this essentially feudal property system still, which gives great power to the ones that own the land. Why can't the plebs, why can't the normal people own the land in this country? People have had civil wars over it in other countries. We're not saying let's go that far. All we're saying is give people the ownership and control that they deserve, that they actually bought into in the first place. And I just want to remind your listeners that freeholders actually own a tiny proportion of value in these blocks of flats. Their own lobby group, the Residential Freehold Association, has admitted that they only own 2.5% capital value. So all this stuff about human rights, what about our human rights, the leaseholders?
Harry, we're going to have to leave it there, but I can hear you're very passionate about this. Harry Scoffin, then, who's the founder of Free Leaseholders, which is this pressure group promoting leasehold reform. Just a reminder that, you know, the people that we spoke to in Bloomsbury House, I mean, the housing association that they have are not for profit. But obviously this issue with leasehold is an issue all around the country. There's lots on this on the BBC News website this morning. A documentary tonight as well at 7:30 on BBC One.